So recently, one of my subscribers asked if I would do a comparison between the Sony a6400 and the Sony a7 IV, which I'm recording on right now. So I know there's going to be at least one person interested in watching this video. So I will stress this is not going to be a fair comparison because we have one beginner-ish level camera, of course, that came out in 2019, and we have a quite serious semi-pro full-frame camera that came out only a few months ago. But nonetheless, during all the tests that I've done, I have found quite a few very interesting little differences. So stick around and we'll get into them right now. Okay, so to break this video down for you, if you do want to skip ahead, I'll be leaving all the timestamps down below, but we will be discussing the differences in the build, as well as the differences in the photo and video quality. So we're talking sensors and recording capabilities, as well as comparing two photos directly against each other. We're doing autofocus tests, we'll be doing vlogging difference, so the stabilization or lack thereof, as well as the internal mic differences and the rolling shutter differences. So to start off with, we'll be with the a6400, which has a significantly smaller body. Paired with this is the crop sensor, which means everything is 1.5 times, though we do have a C1 option button on the top, as well as a C2. So there is a little bit of customization here. It does have a built-in flash up the top, as well as a 180-degree articulating screen, which if you have an external mic, you do need to get one of these external microphone rigs because the screen is just going to be in the way of the mic or vice versa. And next we have the Sony a7 IV, which has custom buttons and settings for both photo and video, plus an S&Q mode in the dial for slow and fast. It has a 33 megapixel sensor as opposed to the 24 megapixel sensor, which we'll talk about later. It also has a joystick, EV compensation dial, which is customizable and lockable, a full flip out screen, dual card slots, and IAF for human, animal, and bird, plus a new focus mapping. This lastly has a maximum shutter speed of 1/8000, and the a6400 in respect has a maximum shutter speed of 1/4000 to the second. So as mentioned, this is a crop sensor camera, and it is 24 megapixels, so you are still going to get a very high quality image out of it, though because it's crop sensor, the lens I have on at the minute is a 17mm lens, which equates to about 25mm after you add in the crop. Now this sensor, from my own experience, can comfortably handle noise up to about ISO 800. Anything past that, it does kind of start to fall apart. Though if you do pair it with a good quality lens, you can kind of get away with it a little bit further up the ISO range to roughly about 1600 ISO. But anything past that, you're not going to be getting much more out of it. So what does that mean? It means if you are someone who likes taking pictures of birds or wildlife and you need that extra reach from your camera, a crop sensor is going to be, in my opinion, a much better alternative to a full frame because of the fact that you're always going to get the zoom. You can use full frame lenses on this body without any issue, but you will get a significantly longer reach with a higher megapixel count than you would with using crop mode on a full frame body, for example. Now, speaking of sensors and crops, the a7 IV has a newly developed 33 megapixel sensor, which means that if you do want to use crop mode, which I have said in the past that I do actually like using, it does equate to roughly 14 megapixel. Still usable, though if you do want to be taking pictures of things quite far away and you want to blow up that image or work a lot with it, then it's not really going to be the camera for you. Now, on top of that, full frame lenses mean more money. So you just have to equate that into the final purchase or the final decision that you make when thinking about a full frame camera. But in saying that, because it is 33 megapixel, you can take a shot at, say, 100mm and crop in post quite significantly and still retain a very large amount of information and detail. And lastly, the ISO range for this camera has two native modes. One is ISO 6400 and the other one is 12800. So there is a lot more leeway when it comes to low light with this camera and keeping the images like all together and not falling apart, if you know what I mean. Now next is the video comparison, and the a6400 does shoot 4K, 24 and 30 respectively, though 4K 30 does involve a 1.2 times crop, which I will link a video up here just really showing you exactly what the differences are. Now this also does have an S&Q mode, but it only is going to be in 1080p up to 100 megabits. So there is a little bit of a downgrade when it comes to using that mode, but by all means it's still not what I would refer to as bad in any way, shape or form, because of what you are really getting with this size camera for the price range. Now comparatively, the a7 IV does shoot 4K, which is oversampled from a massive 7K, which means that you can zoom in like this, and you really do retain quite a lot of detail in that shot. As well as this, you have 4K 24 and 30 without any crop, and you do have 4K 60, though that is downsampled from 4.6K, and it is in Super 35. Now this can lead to some people not particularly liking it, though if you do use a APS-C lens like the Tamron 17-70, you can get around the crop and still retain that wider field of view. And lastly, this does shoot in 4K 10-bit 422 color. So you do get a very, very nice, clean, flat image out of this camera, which has a lot more leeway for grading. And I will mention this does have a little bit of that with a Cine 4 profile, but it's nowhere near as capable as this. But I did say this is not going to be a fair comparison. It's more just like pointing out the differences. So now we are going to jump into the computer and I'll show you side by side two different images, and I'll let you choose which one you think is better or worse, and then we will be heading outside and doing further tests out there. So let's go. Actually, I do want to say before we get into the computer, because I forgot to mention it, that this has the newer Z-type battery and this has the older FW battery, something or other. But I've never once thought this camera could use more juice when recording or taking pictures. It does get quite a respectable amount of battery life, and the a7 IV is the same. But I would probably say in real world terms, not what you see on the spec sheets, that they're pretty comparable when it comes to battery life.
All right, so let us have a look at some comparison. These pictures are completely unedited. They have just been converted to JPEG because Lightroom was not having a good time today. So let's have a look. Now on the right, we have the a7 IV, and on the left, we have the a6400. So if we zoom in to 100%, we'll be able to see what the differences are. Now, instantly we can tell that there is more detail in the a7 IV compared to the a6400. It's looking a little soft here. And the thing that I really noticed is if we go in, have a look over here in the background, the a7 IV is a little bit more blurred out or has less detail in the background. As again, if we go and have a look over in this corner, we can see as well that the a6400 is sharper. Now this comes down to the difference in the sensor, as you can tell. So because the a7 IV has got a bigger sensor, it is able to retain a stronger depth of field compared to the a6400. Now they were both shot at f2.8, so there's no real differences there in terms of the f-stop, but it is worth noting that you will get a stronger depth of field for subjects either far or close when you use a bigger full frame sensor compared to a crop sensor. Another example is if we have a look here at the blurred out part of the bushes in front of the tree, is that the a7 IV is a lot more blurred out, as you can tell through this area, compared to the a6400. It's a lot sharper here, and that again is just because the bigger sensor is able to hold a stronger depth of field compared to the a6400. But nonetheless, it still is doing an excellent job, so I am not in any way, shape or form dissing it. Next, we'll have a look at quite a high contrast scene right here, and you can tell that the a7 IV and the a6400 are pretty comparable in this matter. The a6400 is holding a little bit more of the blacks compared to the a7 IV, and the background, as you can tell here, though not completely the same, is a little bit softer compared to this on the a6400. There's just a lot more separation between the subject matter and the subject of the tree. Now in terms of that, we can also see the color. Here we have much warmer colors on the a6400 and the a7 IV. We were using very, very similar lenses to compare the two, but the a6400 is just holding a warmer tone compared to the a7 IV. And lastly, we have this picture of a dog. Now again, a7 IV, 6400. But if we zoom in, we are able to tell that on the right hand side there is a lot more detail being retained in this shot compared to the one on the left. Now that is again not saying that the a6400 is bad in any way, it's just that it is a smaller sensor on a smaller camera, and that the a7 IV is able to retain much more information than on the a6400. Again, also the a7 IV has the animal eye AF, so we will see the eye is very much in focus here. Compared to here, it's a little bit dull, a little bit blackened out. But that is again a technology thing and something to be expected when comparing these two cameras side by side. Alright, so let's go outside and see what the outside world has to offer. Alright, so here we have an autofocus test between the two cameras. Now, this first test you will not see too much of a difference between the two cameras because, quite frankly, the a6400 can hold its own when it comes to autofocus. But watch this second test and let me know what you think with this. Now I'm not sure why this happened because the a7 IV and the 6400 were using the same settings each time, but I think I'm going to award the autofocus test to the a6400 in this instance. So this is what it looks like to vlog on the Sony a7 IV with a 17mm attached and the audio running through a professional microphone. Now, because it is a 17mm lens on a full frame camera, you do get the 17mm look, and on top of that you do get the eye AF because it is tracking my eye right now. So if I do this and I switch eyes, the eye AF will look on to whichever eye is closest to the camera. Now we're going to switch over to the a6400 and I will show you what the difference is there. And this is what it looks like to vlog with the a6400 with a 17mm lens attached. Now I am holding the camera a little bit further away because of the fact that I do have that 1.5 times crop, but this is what you can expect with a stabilized lens on top of that. And lastly, this is the audio coming out of the a7 IV without the microphone attached. So this is what you can expect coming from the body only. And this is the audio coming directly out of the a6400's body without any microphone attached. So do let me know down below which one you think sounds better or worse, because I'm curious to find out personally which one is better or worse. And for now, let's jump back into the office because I'm getting eaten alive by mosquitoes out here. And lastly is the rolling shutter test. I'll let you decide which one wins this. Yeah, that's pretty bad. All right, we have finally gotten to the end of this multi-day, multi-location, multi-everything comparison video. I really hope that you enjoyed it and that you got something out of it and were able to either help make a decision with which camera you want to buy or just help you understand as to how far technology has come since both of these cameras have been released. It certainly has been very insightful for me going forward, so I hope it was the same for you. Now, if there was anything in particular that surprised you, then do let me know in the comment section down below, because then we can have a discussion about it down there. And if you want to see more photography related content, then why not consider subscribing, because that will just help push this content out more and it will really help me out in the process. So as always, enjoy the rest of your day and I will see you in the next video. Bye.